and welcome to the latest edition of the video podcast. I'm here today with my guest, Samuli. Samuli is the Chief Digital Officer of Stora Enso. Today we're going to be talking about data estate modernization and the journey of data from one of the leading experts inside the market. Welcome, Samuli, to the video podcast, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Scott. I mean, great to be here. Absolutely.
Great. So we've got about 20 minutes today together, and what I'd like to start with is just a little bit, if you don't mind, of introducing yourself, a little bit your role, and a little bit your story of how you came to Stora Enso, and then we'll get into some of the key topics of today.
Oh, that's good. Thanks. So, yeah, I've been here around 3 years. I'm Chief Digital Officer. So basically what I do, I look after our global digital initiative. And by digital, we mean like real emerging technology. So when it comes for the virtual reality, machine learning, sensors, augmented reality, all this kind of stuff, that's on my table. And basically how I see my role, my task here is to make sure that, we are accelerating the digital adoption in the whole group. So basically, undepending whether it's a sales or the business unit or factory or HR, we are there with my team, helping them, pushing them, and providing education and funding, all this kind of stuff. So that's what it is. 3 years here from.
Very, very good. A very cool role. Thanks for joining us. Very relevant to this video podcast. And I guess one thing I'd like to start with is, when we were introducing this video podcast, you were telling me that Stora Enso is one of the oldest companies in the world. And I just really like that journey that, you sort of walked me through. It'd be great just to start with that, a little bit of the history of the company, and just so the listeners can sort of hear a bit of the starting point that you had to deal with as you come through this sort of digital journey.
Yeah, that's good. That's actually one part I really like on this Stora Enso. We are really, really old. So basically, the company has been founded 1288. So we are definitely oldest company in the world, something like 700-800 years ago. And that's interesting. And the name is coming from basically Stora Kopparberg, that used to be a big mine back in the middle of Sweden. And of course, after that, we have been making quite a lot of journey in last 800 years. So, changing the business models, pivoting from a mining to paper, and then from paper to renewable materials. And that is giving a bit of an interesting backdrop, of course, of the whole thinking and the way how we are approaching this. And my personal claim of fame, especially when I'm speaking with the people in Asia, is that, I'm the guy who looks after emerging technology in the oldest company in the world. And that's giving a quite a nice character in a way.
It's a nice, let's say, challenge but opportunity in the sense that it's the merging, as you say, of two worlds. That's really interesting. And yeah, a great company. And before you joined, we had a little tour around the premise and some really interesting innovations that I'm sure you and your team are working on as well. So in the topic today, we're talking about data and sort of the value of data and how data is transforming the economy. And let's say one of the key roles that we understand that you're driving at is really leveraging data into the company as one of sort of digital assets for the future. It'd be interesting just to sort of get that introduction of, given you took this role on, you're running the digital team, why was the data estate modernization program so fundamental to Stora Enso's success? Why did you start there? Why are you focusing on this?
Yeah, it's a very good point and question. The thing is, around 3 years ago, we realized when we're looking for like a digital initiatives, we had something ongoing, and then there was a willingness from a top management that hey, let's push, let's accelerate, let's start to do more digital and really see how it could be used for our purposes. And let's explore, let's do different type of cases and then try to scale those up. And we quite quickly realized that actually one thing we really are missing is some kind of a holistic approach for data. Because in the end, if you think about these cases, let's say we use machine learning, for example, to run our factory or help to running our factories, do some tuning there, or using drones back in the forests in order to actually understand what kind of forest asset we have. It's all about data. We're using these fancy gadgets and devices and everything like that, but in the end, it's about the data. And then, because of the history, long history of the company, we have been making acquisitions, divestments, different type of company changes. The data landscape was quite broken in a way. There's some fragmentation on it, and you can. It's hard to actually tap on data that is very fragmented and in the silos across the company. If you try to create a digital solution that is then leveraging that data, and then you try to scale it up. And because of that, we realized we need to address this as one of the cornerstones in our digital strategy.
Very good, very good. It provides that platform for a lot of change, I think, as well. I think that's kind of what we're also thinking is, yeah, if you get the data right, you can build a lot of the solutions and services on top. So yeah, absolutely. I guess one question just linked to the data, and obviously we had a discussion before, is about data ownership versus sort of use. And I'm just sort of interested in your view. We had a discussion before. Ownership in your eyes is really important, and it's part of the success of how you've been using your data. It'd be great just to hear a little bit more about that. What does ownership mean to Stora Enso? What does it look like? How does that sort of what are you trying to get to with that, so that you can let data more?
Data ownership is maybe the most complex question of all of this. I mean, the technology itself is quite easy, I mean, how we had done it, just to maybe I give a bit of background on that first. So what we did is that because of this like a legacy landscape of quite a big IP, we decided to create actually like a separate reference architecture for the digital that is running on parallel on our legacy architecture. And then we did it based on like Azure. So we actually have like a Microsoft Azure running there. And then we create like a data lakes on top of that. And the thinking was that, I mean, what we do, so instead of creating like a digital solution that taps directly into operational system, the data flows via our data lake. And that's the way how we can manage, how we can keep it like clean, and how we can actually publish it in a nice manner. And of course, when you start to do things like that, the immediate question is how you get the data. I mean, where it is, who is owning it, and who is guaranteeing, I mean, somehow the data is usable. And that is something where we still are working our minds, I mean, how it works best. But I mean, currently it works so that, I mean, we have like a process owners with global processes, and these people are owning like the global master data. And then we have in different use cases, different like data owners in a way. And then we have this data guardians, who are looking after data lake and making sure that, I mean, when we are publishing data out of that, I mean, that data is reliable and you can actually do something based on it. So it's like quite a complex net of people, and I think it's something that is still emerging how it actually should work in the future, and we are learning every day. So that's maybe how I feel.
Yeah, and I understand. I think it sounds like you have to get to. I mean, it sounds like you've got to quite a fair bit of maturity there, in the sense that if you start to have, as you say, sort of data owners, process owners, a structure that that seems like quite a step forward. And I'd be interested. Where do you start from to get to that point then? So where's the beginning? Where if you could wind your mind back to the beginning, first sort of weeks, months when you were starting this program of change. Where do you start from, right, to get to that sort of more mature position? Where's the beginning? Where's the
thing is, how I see the whole thing, it's quite iterative process. I mean, you need to do something a little, then you learn, then you do something more, then you fail, then you do something again. And what I think is the complex with the data and these kind of things about data modernization and data lakes and everything, they're quite technical issues. And typically in an organization like us, and I guess many peers as well, these kind of decisions are made by general management, where we invest. I mean, we need to have some money and resources in place to create like a data lake setup. So we were a little bit in a luxury position because in a DG unit, we have a funding capability for quite many things. And then I had a great technical team. I mean, really cool, really good architects who realized from the very beginning that this is one of the fundamentals we need to put in place. And because we operate quite trust-based, we let them run. We said, okay, probably better than me what we should do. So, create something. And then they created like reference architectures. And then it turned out this is exactly what we need. And then we started to develop that. So I think, at least from our point of view, it was partially that having like a right type of people inside who had enough passion to push it through, and then enough trust in a management side to give them the freedom to operate on that.
I like that. And let me sort of dig in a bit to that trust piece, because I think that's quite interesting. Let's say, my experience, not every data initiative succeeds. So, there's a lot of failures in the market at the moment. Probably a lot of people watching this, maybe have tried for the first, second time and it's failed. And, what tends to happen is, as things fail, you try to take more control, right? And that doesn't always drive the right result. And I think it's interesting that your approach is succeeding because you're taking the hands-off approach, and you're sort of, let's say hands-off, but more, let's say, enabling, but allowing them to have freedom where they then iterate with you, right? So that's sort of more, pseudo hands-off approach. Interested. How do you develop trust like that? How do you actually get
Yeah.
to that, right? Because
It,
that's
yeah.
it's a
Mm,
difficult process for some people, right? It's to get to
yeah.
that point.
Yeah.
How do you do it?
Yeah, it's coming from our general approach. I mean, as I mentioned, we are pretty old. We have been innovating ourselves quite many times. In order to innovate, you need to have an open mind. And we,
Yes.
in that sense, as a company, I think in a company DNA, we believe on a quite open innovation and basically trying things, testing things. Of course, same time we try to do quite robust things, and this is a balance to manage. But I think our top management has had quite a good understanding about it, and basically from the very beginning of our digital journey, they went for the route of, hey, let's explore, let's do like a fail fast, let's try this, and we have been consciously building up structures and mechanisms how people are ready to go out and test things, and even if those fail, it's okay. And we have been pushing that like 3 years in a way, and communicating it quite heavily. And we also have like structures in place, like a funding structures that make it possible. So you can get money to try something, and if that learning is that it doesn't work, that's fine, as long as you make the learning webinar. So we typically are trying to like that's what we're saying for the people. Like, it's not that much about you fail the project. You fail the project if it doesn't create a learning. If it creates a learning, fine. And now this same approach that we are having in general in our like a DG project is used also in our reference architecture model and how we do the data management. So I think it's not like a silver bullet. It's more about the whole approach of the company for digital exploration that is helping us here.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Okay, so obviously you sit within the more, let's call it, management side of the equation. Let's say, and it'd be great to understand just some of the outcomes that you've been able to achieve. So what's some of the benefits that this sort of data monetization program is bringing to your business, and things that you think have changed as a result? Just give some of the highlights, if that's okay.
Yeah, so we have been now delivering we have something like 150 projects we have been doing in the last 3 years. So there's a certain amount of volume on it. And we couldn't have done it without creating this kind of a data monetization approach. Because I mean, if we would have been relying on always integrating with our, let's say, operational legacy systems, and with all the hurdles around that, it would have been next to impossible. So now we are gaining speed, which means that, of course, when there's a new data set we need to find an integration, we need to somehow get it in the data lake, and then we need to publish it. But once the data set is there, then reusing it is quite straightforward. It's like easy and simple. And because of that, there's a speed. And I think from my point of view, the speed is definitely one of the key assets. Then there's another one, and that is because we are having now this data in this kind of a cloud-based data lake, we also can open it if needed for wider ecosystem. So we also are able to this way basically be the ones who own the data, and then let the others to operate on it when they create like a digital solutions for us. And this is also quite useful. So I think these two things, so agility, so speed, and also this kind of opportunity to open when needed.
Understood. And so I guess now you've built this sort of data lake, you've got the speed, you've got the agility, you're sort of flexing, let's say, the sort of use cases, you've got the 150 projects, that's very well done. What's next? Where do you take it? What's the next step? Is it more of the same and faster, more data?
Yeah.
Is it different? Does it evolve, let's say, or does it just get bigger? Interested in your view.
I think there's two things. First of all, I think our model actually is working quite nicely in general. And there's one thing which I didn't mention earlier. We don't come up with these ideas ourselves. So it's not a central digi team. It's we are educating the whole company. And then out of that education, there's ideas popping up in our mills, in the management, in sales, in HR. And then they have a way how they can actually ask funding from us and get this kind of project ongoing. So the ideas have always a business owner, somebody who's passionate. And then basically on top of this, like a passionate business owner, we had the technical building blocks and the funding capability. And because of that, it's possible to run this. So I think that the general model as such is pretty good. And we're going to continue that. However, that's the one thing. If I think about these projects, most of them are quite narrow. So they're narrow use cases. We are using machine learning algorithm for a very specific purpose with a very specific set of data. And now when our maturity is increasing and we are having more and more of this kind of solutions out there, there starts to be a point to start connecting this and creating bigger use cases, more like end-to-end processes, which include cognitive process, automation, everything like that. And that is our like a next step. But I mean, of course, we're gonna do these use cases one by one, and then on top of that, create something bigger. And that's how I see the future.
I understand. I think that's really interesting. That's the sort of, let's say, pattern recognition, trying to bring a greater value to the sum of the parts by connection, by let's say bigger bets, bigger, let's say, value horizontally. And I think that's definitely, let's say, my view as well. And so if we step, let's say, beyond a little bit the sort of Stora Enso to now and just talk as sort of experts on the market, it'd be great to sort of get your view of where do you think even broader, data will go. So, where if we gaze into the future a little bit together, your view, you've started this journey, or you've come through this journey, you've started with data use cases, you're getting into sort of modernized architecture, linking things together. Where do you think the data market is going? Is it that it's obviously scaling? Is it getting more analytical? Is it about people? Are there certain aspects of the market that are really at the edge right now that you think are really important to success? So just interested in your view. Where do you think the market context is going for data? Is there some things that our listeners should be aware of?
Yeah, I think one thing which, I mean, especially like 3 years ago and still today, there's quite a lot of like a data silos. So basically when, let's say, an automation supplier is providing us like a big machinery back into our mill, quite often they actually try to create like a data silo. So nobody else can access the data. It's like a black box. And I think that's moving out. I mean, we as a customer, and I guess many others of our peers don't allow that anymore. We want to have clear ownership of our data, and actually, so we take care of it, we manage it, and then the others who are providing technology are using it. And I think that's maybe the biggest kind of conceptual thing I think is happening. So all the organizations who are progressive actually are taking the more clear ownership of the data and making decisions. What is the data we want to keep really, really confidential? What is the data we actually want to share with the rest of the world, even in some cases, in order to gain some common benefits? And I think that's one of the things which we are now learning how it works. So I think that's one thing. And maybe we will see also emergence of some kind of a common data sets increasingly. I mean, you can see already now, if you go for the search engine, you can find some common libraries of how to educate machine learning algorithms, signs of a cars or whatever, traffic signs and others. And I think maybe we will see that development happening in everywhere. So we have more and more this kind of common sets that can be used to train the systems. And I think that may be another route. So basically, first of all, organizations taking more control of their data and making more conscious decision what they do with that. I mean, and then secondly, maybe more common sets of training data.
I understand. I like that idea that, let's say, there's more and more codification of how to do things, and that how to do things gives you, I don't know how to say it, but tools that you can iterate against your data sets to try out. So in your iteration of data value, you can try out these different toolkits instead of having to always build the toolkits from the ground up, right? So I think that's great. That really creates that speed and agility. I mean, this change towards sort of, let's say, coordinated data, sort of more advanced use cases. What do you think it means for the future business leaders? So, you're obviously in this sort of digital officer role, but let's say, not every business leader is a tech person, has this sort of, digital DNA, is really looking at the horizon and thinking, okay, we need to make our business a data-driven business. But maybe, started off with maybe one of the first public cloud providers, doesn't really know where they're going. Just interested, what do you think the future business leaders of tomorrow, have to have? Do they need technical skills? Do they need, I don't know, some enablement skills? Just what's your view? What's the requirement of the sort of next gen?
I think that next gen leaders need to know more about technology. And I don't mean that you need to be developer or data scientist, but you need to understand the basic fundamentals, how it's working. And on that point, as an example, we have been running now quite a lot of education for our own people. as an example, in finance, we have been now training 100 business controllers about the advanced analytics. So we actually, this classroom training about the analytics, advanced analytics, and even machine learning. And we have actually put them all of them to create a simple machine learning models. So they start to understand, actually, this is a tool that you can use. You're used to use Excel. Maybe you could actually replace it with some Python code. Who knows? And I think that's one of the things what we are trying to do. So we are trying to make it less mystical, more easy to understand. The question is, everything is just like a very powerful tools to managing your future and managing what your decisions daily basis. And I think that's the key element from my point of view. That every like executive and manager should understand that it's just a tool set. I mean, you can have the techies making very deep dive technology, but you need to understand what you want to do with the data.
I understand. So thanks for that, Samuli. And let's do the last little bit of this video cast, which is a little bit about you and I. So we knew each other, over, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago. We were both at Gartner. We spent our time at Gartner, obviously learned a lot about technology and the market. But obviously both moved into, what is the industry, let's say, and certainly from our side, managed service provider for cloud. And obviously, we've had experiences before Gartner, but what's interesting is sort of doing that advisory side, the really thinking side, maybe, and then going into the practice. And I'm just interested, as you've sort of made that move and now sort of gone into the doing, what are some of the personal learnings or challenges you've had to overcome as you made that move and you've been, let's say, driving this data agenda? What's some of the things you've had to change in your mind or relearn or reset a bit as you've done it?
Well, I think Gartner is a fantastic company, first of all, and I think what I learned there was great, and then basically this kind of like a conceptual models how to approach different type of things. I mean, that was really useful. I'm still using those today. I mean, when we are doing things, we use a conceptual models, and we create some kind of frameworks that this is the strategy, this is what we should achieve, and stuff like that. However, then there's the reality, and the reality is typically not that much conceptual, that there's a slowness in our organization. It may be because of the people, it may be because of the culture, it may be because of the funding, whatever. And the theoretical answer is here, and this is what you should achieve. But in reality, you are here, and then you are trying to juggle your way in a good enough solution. And I think that's maybe, of course, as a consultant, I knew it as well. But I mean, now basically, it's getting yet more tangible. That I mean, this is just setting the vision, but then the actual value is created by getting there, at least close there. So I think that's maybe the thing I have been needed to learn most.
And I think there's let's say similar thing. I think you have to sort of pivot and adapt regularly. So you have to, how do I say, not always search for the perfect answer. Let's say adjust tact quite a lot, shape right and left, as you say. I like the sort of, windy view. And that's just because, you learn as well as you go. You have to, I find that you have to bring people on the journey, and let's say that takes a bit of time, and that gives you the acceleration downstream, but you have to do it up front, and that sort of, so I think there's a lot of that sort of iterative, windy road view. I totally empathize with that. So Samuli, again, thank you very much for your time today. We've walked through together, I think, a great overview of Stora Enso's history. We talked a fair bit about data estate modernization programs and what you've achieved, which it sounds very interesting. And for those that don't know the company, I suggest having a look at it. It's some great products and services that come through. And then we've ended a bit on some of the personal learnings and some of the journeys we've been on as well together. So from my side to you, again, thank you very much for joining me today. I wish you all the best in the next steps of your journey, and I'm sure we'll be in contact in the market as the market sort of evolves as well. So thanks again.
And thanks for having me here. It was great to have a chat with you, Scott.